Coogs house. Houston gets to stay at home and play LSU in the Texas Bowl at NRG Stadium. But the biggest question is going to be not necessarily what happens on the field. We got to figure out who's even on it first.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to step by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Making the Locked On Podcast Network the number one sports podcast network in the world. If you want to join the conversation down below and you don't know what to say, tell us if you ever called in sick when you weren't really sick. Now, I am still getting over something that I am really sick from. So if you hear that in my throat, I'm sorry today. But we're talking some of the first segment about people not playing in a football game. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Best place to get into that football game if you want to be a fan in the stands, or if you want to get into the World Cup this upcoming summer. United States, one of 3 countries hosting North America. Make sure you check out Game Time. Code Locked On College or $20 off your first purchase over there. Now, I mentioned first segment is who's calling who's going to be able on the field, really. Second, I want to talk about what the deal is here with Houston not getting in the best option for bowl games potentially. And last but not least, we will preemptively, I hadn't even heard him say it yet, only seen the text messages and the YouTube thumbnail. We're going to preemptively talk about Drake Toll's take that Notre Dame should look at the Big 12 preemptively. I want to say thank you to the everydayer all access members listening to the show ad free ad free through that feed. All kinds of great options over there. Make sure you go check out lockedonpodcast.com. Check out the college section. Join the Everydayer Club. Exclusive access for just a couple bucks a month. You want to join that tier of fans. You can also get like access to a merch store, things like that. Discord server. The Everydayer Club, the Everydayer All Access Club, I should say, has a newsletter as well. Bigger discount at that merch store. All kinds of fun stuff over there. I'm happy to give you a little bit extra content through those each and every day. Got some couple, film tidbits up right now. Got more coming soon. All right. This bowl season's weird now. Like, it just is. And it is very, very normal to see a large number of rosters opting out. And I think that this is an interesting question for Houston because Willie Fritz, frankly, in his presser this week has said that they don't anticipate having a lot of opt-outs, but then also had, it was announced, I think GoCoogs.com had it first. And admittedly, I kind of wanted to wait and see how things played out myself. But Demetrius Pancake Hunter is not with the team and program anymore. That is official. I guess I should say sounds like very real. I guess the team has not said anything on it yet, but it sounds very, very real. And frankly, I kind of wish the team and Pancake had a chance to speak for themselves before it got leaked out on Twitter. But that's the way that goes. And so that's guy that started a bunch of games for you at center this year, gone. One of your highly talented recruits, gone. I guess he was a recruit a couple years ago, obviously, but still. I imagine, while he has not said anything, that Tanner Koziol is a very serious DNP player decision kind of guy for the bowl game for Houston. He and maybe Amare Thomas, though Amare Thomas probably stands to get more stuff on video, are both guys that should very much expect to be drafted in the NFL draft. Amare Thomas maybe a little bit less so. He does another year of eligibility. But both those guys, I think, have a really very real decision about do they want to put their bodies at risk in a bowl game versus working out to prepare for the NFL draft. They did just get to Houston, so maybe the camaraderie is not the same. I would think that playing in a bowl game would help both of them if they excelled, but now they're here and there. I think those two guys you could see potentially sit for something like that. Fritz acts like there's not going to be a lot, so I don't think there are going to be a lot. The inverse of this is that LSU likely will have a lot. Lane Kiffin has said he will not be on the sidelines for the bowl game. He did not say he's not be involved in practice and things like that leading up. He is creating a program. But Lane Kiffin, who just got to LSU, will be watching likely from a very fancy air-conditioned box. I think, though, I guess it's energy, so it's all in water. I do think, though, that Kiffin's going to have some imprint on the offense and defense in this game, even if it's just as a guy that coached against LSU this year. LSU is turning over some staff, but not all of their staff. I think some of the defensive guys are staying, which is notable for Houston, with Wegman having played against their defense and played not so well, frankly, against their defense when he was at A&M. That's kind of one of his couple bad games people hang their hats on that like to hate on Connor Wegman. But also means it's a chance for him to redeem himself. So, well, that's a storyline we'll probably go through as we get closer to the game. We got 3 weeks here to talk about it, feels like. I wonder, though, as you see who's going to, like, LSU's already had a major defensive lineman announced. He's not going to be there. You're going to see a lot of guys that defect from LSU because they want to exploit the transfer portal, or they want to hurt themselves before exploiting the transfer portal, or they don't feel connected with Lane Kiffin and the offensive staff, or whatever, right? And so what I bet you see is a very small sideline on the LSU side and a very big sideline on the Houston side, because Fritz has said that they don't anticipate a bunch of guys defecting and not playing in this. Now, does that impact the weight of the game? In an honest moment, I think probably a little bit. It probably does shift things a little bit. You've got to be prepared for all the asterisks and context people are going to throw on it when you say you beat an SEC team or whatever. You also, in the inverse, that are going to have to swallow all of that whenever it goes, if it goes the other way, right? So with Houston in particular, LSU, like LSU is not they're not a program that was above a Texas Bowl this year, but they are a program that I think fancies themselves as above it most years. I think that will also have a factor here. Whereas Houston's a program that everyone signed up for this program knows they are in a rebuilding phase of the program, right? And part of that rebuilding phase is playing in more traditional bowl games, not in the CFP necessarily yet, right? And so people sign up to come to Houston and they anticipate playing in, if they have a good season, a bowl game. And then as we string a few of those together, you kind of keep working things up. LSU is a different program, rightly or wrongly. That's not the expectation necessarily there. And so I say rightly or wrongly because we could have that. That's a whole separate discussion, I guess. But you see this. You're going to see a bunch of names come out. And people ask, well, Parker, who do you think is going to sit? Parker, who do you think is going to sit? Parker, who do you think is going to sit? I mentioned Koziol and Amare Thomas. I could see Nussmeier and a couple of the key offensive weapons LSU sitting, preserve their health. I'm intrigued by if AJ Halsey decides to play or not in this game for LSU. Keep an eye on that on Twitter and things like that these days. Honestly, I don't even know that it would necessarily be ducking smoke at AJ Halsey. He is a guy with draft aspirations, and he's probably a guy that could, has video already. A pretty strong year at LSU this year, pretty strong year at Houston last year. He can still impact the game from the sidelines, having coached them up over the course of a couple weeks because he was on Houston's roster through last spring ball. I don't know that he's going to defect from the program. I could just see him not suiting up on game day or something like that. I don't know. I also could see him wanting to get one more great video and when they wanted to stick it to because he feels like he's going to have a good disadvantage having played against Houston every day at practice for a couple weeks last spring or whatever, right? I'll be interested. I'm interested to see how that one goes. I imagine a lot of players at LSU that will sit, and I think Houston's going to have an advantage in that. And I think that while that does add some size of whatever to the game, I don't know that necessarily has to have a negative impact on the way we can use the game to grow. The best part of the bowl game to me for Houston as a rebuilding program is you get this window of a bunch of practice time for red shirts, for freshmen, as you build a program, instill your culture. Coach Fritz mentioned that at National Signing Day times, he mentioned that guys that are graduating early and get on campus can get involved in some of these practices too. This is all good for the program. Whereas if you finish your season already, you're just kind of screwed. Now, Houston might have still gotten screwed in one way. I'll talk about this for just 1 second before we get there. Today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Omaha Steaks. The holidays come with two big goals: feeding people and finding out a gift that they'll actually love. We want both those handled in one move. Omaha Steaks is the way to go. From hosting to gifting, they deliver the world's best steak experience right to your door because during their Sizzle All the Way sale, you can stock up in a huge way. 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. It gets even better. Locked On College listeners can get an extra $35 off with code COLLEGE at checkout. Save big on gourmet gifts and more holiday favorites with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide during the Sizzle All the Way sale and an extra $35 off with promo code COLLEGE at checkout. Terms apply. See the site for details. It's omahasteaks.com, code COLLEGE. Parker Ainsworth locked on Coogs here, and I want to investigate something a little bit. Just Duarte tweeted out, and it's kind of getting run with on the internet in a way that it's probably not surprising, antagonizes Houston. So picking bowl games can be interesting. Houston finished as the 5th-ranked team in the college football playoff poll in the Big 12, actually 4th technically in the Big 12 based on tiebreakers because they beat the other teams with their same conference record in Arizona State. But the college football playoff poll did have Arizona just ahead of Houston, Utah a little bit ahead of that, BYU, Texas Tech. And so ultimately Houston finishes 5th. And so there used to be an all way where you'd stack up bowl games to get a second place. If this team goes to the college football playoff, the BCS championship, this team's going to go this, and you just kind of would slide teams over. And it's not quite that way anymore. But along the way here, teams are picking bowl games and kind of a committee. So the Big 12 will have their handful of slots. The bowls will reach out and go back and forth, and teams that qualify will get to kind of more of a negotiation and conversation about where you go. And it came out, the Duarte tweet said that the Alamo Bowl, notably played in San Antonio, hence Alamo, was not considering Houston very strongly because of fan turnout to road games. Or I guess fan turnout, making them worried about who would show up if they hosted Houston at the Alamo Bowl. Now, that is also apparently in the same tweet thread or stream of consciousness from Duarte. And I'm giving him credit because he put on Twitter. If there was someone before him, please put in the comments. And I don't mean to not give credit where it's due. But he also put in that that's one of the reasons that a very serious bowl for Houston was the Independence Bowl all over again. Having just been to that in 2020, what was that, 3? Now, I think people were kind of questioning what that means or how that impacts things, or does that even matter? Ultimately, the Texas Bowl selected Houston with the thought, in part being, it sounds like, that Houston fans don't have to travel necessarily to a Houston site. So that kind of negated some of that. Houston also gets to play LSU, who has a gigantic alumni base in Houston. I believe it's the highest outside of the state of Louisiana. It's going to sell a lot of tickets kind of game, right? Even if LSU's down or whatever. And what's interesting to me is this impacts the bottom line. Different bowls pay different amount of money. And part of the goal of beginning a bowl game is to improve your program, and that's going to cost money. Now, this is not necessarily I can't stop. It's not necessarily a 1-to-1 ratio where the money from the bowl game will help cover all the costs, whatever. But it is a large sum of money. For instance, I found these numbers on the internet, so bear with me, but it felt reputable. The Texas Bowl's payout is $6.4 million. The Alamo Bowl's payout, which used to be the top Big 12 team, not in a national championship determining playoff kind of situation, the Alamo Bowl's payout is $8.2 million. That's almost $2 million different. The college football playoff was where they actually are interesting in that, like, because each round is a little bit more money. The quarterfinals are $4 million, which is actually less than the Texas Bowl, but the semifinals are 6, and you could theoretically get 10 by winning the 2, right? So, and then the other 8 for playing the national championship game. That is an interesting comparison, but this dollars and cents bit is interesting because we're going to punish schools that have trouble getting fans in the stands as a kind of offshoot random because they felt like it metric. Meanwhile, you're going to reward people that have traveling fans, even though that they might have had a worse season on the field, the on the field product. Now, I I get upset about that, but ultimately I can already see people type in the comments, Parker, this is the way the fans are. We got to get this fixed and not worry about it. And I don't want to say bogus to that, but I do think that context is incomplete. Um, eh, Look, people that are of the affluence to take their family to a bowl game, even in the city of Houston, that don't have to travel for. But if you're going to a bowl game, it's a trip. It's an expensive ticket. It's a little more expensive, etc. It's also might be during the day on a weekday. You got to take time off of work or what. Like, theoretically, right? You'd have to do all those kinds of things to get to a bowl game. And generally speaking, people of that mindset are in their 40s, right? And they're people that are younger in terms of the grand scope of things, but they have families. They have kids that enjoy football. They have, an established life or whatever in that sense, right? And I think that, well, I understand that's a very small portion of the population necessarily because you're paying a bunch of money for a football ticket. I would point out that if you're looking at a 45-year-old fan and trying to say, well, when were they in college? Where were they going to college? When did they build that school spirit for their alma mater? That's 25 years ago. That's 2000. That's in the weird dark days period where Houston is out of the Southwest Conference. Southwest Conference has dissolved, and it's still kind of finding their way. And sports were not pushed as the same kind of big deal. It's not the same kind of high dollar thing. There's very much a laughing stock of sports culture. Sports fans, future college sports fans in the state of Texas, after that, we're not looking at Houston the same kind of way. And so I do think there's some aspect of like a lost generation of fans here where because of the window of years between, like, let's say Case Keenum to be safe brings a national attention to Houston athletics. And you go like from him to like the end of the Southwest Conference or when it was announced was going to end, let's just call that a solid 15 years for round numbers. That 15-year generation would be the people taking their kids to games right now. And I don't mean to say that is all Ann Richards and those people's fault for not letting Houston in the Big 12. I don't mean to say any of that, although I guess I am actually saying directly that. I don't mean to like be upset about it. I mean it more in an explanation kind of way. There's a generation of Houston fans that doesn't really exist in the same kind of way it does other schools. You have old fans from old glory days that will tell you how great things were. You've got new fans from a post Case Keenum world that are building and growing and strong. That middle group is the few, the proud. There are not many of them, and when you're looking at like who travels to a game, that's kind of like, hey, let's take a family trip, right? That's kind of that group. The younger group, it doesn't have the same kind of, maybe financial stability to pay for the trip, or maybe is too young to. I don't know. Anyway, the young group is too young. The older group is too old, and I think that generation is impacted. We're still seeing the trickle-down effect of all of that. I also say, bluntly, if you're worried about Houston traveling to the Alamo Bowl, look, I know the programs travel very differently and carry very different weight on a national scale. It looked like to me Houston did pretty good getting San Antonio for the Final Four last year. And I would tell you, having been in the stadium for that Final Four night against Duke, there was a lot of red, like a lot of red in that stadium. And I hate to feel like the city of San Antonio didn't think they could attract some percentage of that. to come to a football game? It's the state of Texas, right? Come on, man. Especially then to get USC as the Pac-12-ish representative, because you're telling me a bunch of people are going to leave Southern California over the holidays, come to San Antonio. I've seen USC games on TV. I've seen the empty seats. This empty seats thing is not just a Houston problem; it's an everywhere problem. Well, an almost everywhere problem. Notre Dame is notably one of those places that's not a problem, and they've got other problems. One of which might be that they need to join a conference. And I know that Drake is talking about that's launched about Big 12, and I want to preemptively throw my 2 thoughts in. But first, today's show, as we mentioned earlier, is brought to you by our buddies at Game Time. Whoa, the World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994, and with 48 teams, for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is going to be the hardest part unless you use the Game Time app. It's clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open up, and buy tickets in the moment that they pop up on the app. Puts the power back in your hands, making going to the World Cup realistic instead of some sort of an impossibility. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to the World Cup with every match, concert, or event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Turn to apply. Again, download the app, make an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Park Rangers locked on Coogs here. And listen, I think a lot of talk is being made about Notre Dame and what conference they could join. And I want to stress first, I don't think Notre Dame is joining a conference. I don't think it makes dollars and cents for them to join a conference. I think they've already weaseled their way into never missing the playoffs starting next year. This is all somewhat ironic timing this year, right? I don't think it works for them because a brand the size of them winning a conference title may have a bye if they won a first round playoff game, I guess, or if they won a conference championship game, they would not have to play necessarily first round. Like if Notre Dame as a brand had Texas Tech's resume, they'd be the number 1 team in the country. If a Notre Dame brand had BYU's resume, they'd probably be a top 4 team, and Texas Tech would probably be a top 2 team. Those trickle-down effects would help the conference. I don't know that they help Notre Dame. Because Notre Dame didn't have BYU or Tech's resume, right? Now, I will say it does not sound like they would go join in full-fledged members of the ACC after what happened with them promoting Miami on social media channels, things like that, through marketing, and Miami ultimately getting the spot. There was, billboards in DFW. There were ads all over the radio, and they were like Spotify everywhere about Miami's head-to-head wins over Notre Dame, head-to-head win, I should say, over Notre Dame, and why that should make them in. Ultimately, Notre Dame misses, and Notre Dame misses, and Miami is in, and so it feels like all that worked, right? The AD in Notre Dame said that ACC, quote, did permanent damage to their relationship. This is notable because Notre Dame has all of their non-football sports playing in the ACC, so they may be pulling out of that soon. Who knows? Who knows how upset it'll be in a couple weeks, but certainly sounds like it on the eve of, or I guess on the dust settling of what just happened. Now, I don't think if Notre Dame were to try to join a conference, and I don't think they will, but if Notre Dame were to try and join a conference, I don't think it sounds like they're going to join the ACC in full force. I also don't think that they'll join the Big Ten, given that while so many of their rivals are in the Big Ten, especially with the way that the Pac-12 fell apart and all that, the Big Ten has an NBC deal. NBC, therefore, would have deals with the Big Ten and Notre Dame, and I don't think they want to pull those deals together. They'd rather make money off both sets of rights. And so I don't think that the Big Ten will ultimately vote for that either. I think they'll get pressure from NBC to not do that. And so then you get to, well, who's left? Right, the SEC and the Big 12 would be the options. The SEC has said things about needing even numbers of teams, and Sankey's been very at it. And I don't know if you'd ever turn down Notre Dame, but the SEC has had their back and forth Notre Dame as a conference versus an independent schedule and scheduling this and scheduling that. And so I wonder if there'd be some bad blood there too. That does ultimately the Big 12. The brand of being great for the Big 12. It brings that kind of star power Yormark as much as the conference needs. And frankly, if you're looking for a big win every year, it'd be harder to be bigger than beating Notre Dame even on their down years, right? They're very much in an upswing right now, but even on their down years, beating Notre Dame is a big deal. It'd be a big win for whoever did it. Now, I just don't see any of that happening. And so I see those kind of talks. Notre Dame is going to stay, and they might move their non-football sports somewhere outside the ACC as kind of a punishment for what's happened. But I don't see them moving football into a conference. They make so much more money as an independent. The other thing I would point out to people, and this is kind of where it stings, is that I don't think Notre Dame joining the Big 12, if they were the quality football team they just were, should have changed their outcome. And I say that because I think BYU is a better football team. I think BYU is a better football team than Notre Dame in a bunch of aspects. I think BYU is a strong, physical, defense-led freshman quarterback that just seems to have a knack for getting things done. They lost to Tech twice, but they really were great all year besides that. And I think BYU is better. And BYU went from being an independent to joining the Big 12, has had 2 great seasons, and been squeezed out of the college football playoff twice. Now, they may not have the historic brand power that Notre Dame does, but you can't say their fans don't travel. You can't say they don't do well on TV. And look, I don't mean to scoff at it, but you can't say they're not better. I think BYU is better than them this year. And so I don't know that Notre Dame joining in this iteration would help. I do think that a good Notre Dame brand would be good for the conference. And I do think that if Notre Dame had I don't know, I think I've talked myself in circles in this one. Because I do think if Notre Dame had 2 losses, just in generally speaking, they'd be in the playoff. I don't think on a all things brands being neutral field, they're actually better than BYU, and BYU did not make the playoff. Playoffs probably not brands neutral, so maybe that's not the best way to go about it. I don't know. I see this between text threads going crazy and thumbnails being put out. I think it's a lot of conversation about what Notre Dame's going to do next, and I just don't see it happen. They may move the basketballs and the softballs and the whatever. They're not putting football in a conference. It doesn't make any sense for them to, especially when next year they're going to have this thing kick in. And I opened the segment with this, and I'll probably close with this too. And the ultimate, if we can't play, we're going to take our ball away, and no one else can either. These talks started back when the conference champions all had a bye in the college football playoff. But Notre Dame began talks with the CFP committee about ways to make sure that they had equal treatment, even though they were not in a conference, because the top 5 conference winners are in automatically. Notre Dame can't qualify for one of those. And the old model, 4 of those actually got a bye too, and that's a really theoretical advantage, but it was an advantage they thought the teams were getting, right? And Notre Dame negotiated, and because when the negotiations ended, next season, the fall of 2026, will be the first season. But if Notre Dame is in the top 12 in the college football playoff rankings, they are automatic qualifier. So if they're 13th, no. If they're 12th, they're in, no matter who they got to bump out when they reseed the things because of conference champions, right? And by reseed, I mean the way they pulled in James Madison and Tulane this year, right? And so, with all of that said, I just don't see this happening, and it's fodder. It's fodder. Locked on Coogs Every Dares Club. Make sure you go check out lockedonpodcast.com. Time for that. There'll be more content out each day for you, so make sure you hit over there. And if you're on YouTube, thank you for subscribing. Thank you for hitting the bell so you know when things go live. Locked on Coogs, primarily Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Go Coogs.